This is by far the most talent-rich Contender Series card of 2024. We've got some big names you've probably heard of. We got some big-time prospects you may not have heard of. A lot of talent on this card. There's going to be some good fights. Honestly, some fights where I think both guys are UFC caliber. We're going to go through. I'll give you a breakdown of every single fight. I'll leave you with a pick, but these are not bets. These are just who I think probably going to win or who I think should win. At the end of the day, it is Contender Series, and anything can happen. And honestly, a lot of these guys, they have some big names, but we don't really know how they're going to do in MMA just because of a lack of experience with the MMA world. We'll talk about that later. Artem Vahkitov coming for Alex Pereira's throat. It's gonna be a good fight. It's gonna be a good fight. He's got a good matchup. We'll see how it works out. But let's take a look at how things have been going down on the Contender Series. Favorites have been winning at 74%. They're 29-10 through 8 weeks. Underdogs last week were 0-5. So the favorites swept. If you bet on all 10 of those underdogs, let's just say you bet on all the underdogs. I might try to look at the math, but there's some big underdogs that came through. You might be in the positive. Even though that the favorites are winning at 74%, there are some big favorites that have lost. So there are some big favorites on this card. I think 3 of the fights, there's a minus 500 favorite or more. So you got to tread lightly in some of these Contender Series cards, betting those big chalk favorites. But I always like to give you this recap just to see how things are going. Favorites have been doing pretty well, though. Let's hop into it with the first fight of the night. Sean Gauci. I don't know how to say his last name. And when I watch film, I don't have the sound on because I don't want to be swayed. But Sean Gauci, really good prospect. Anthony Drilich, really good prospect. I think both of these guys are UFC caliber. I think this is going to be a really good fight. Both guys fighting out of Australia. So Gauci has been fighting in Hex, and Drilich has been fighting in Eternal. So those are both very solid promotions out there and very respectable opponents in there. But at times, you kind of get, I don't know what it is, but these Australian promotions, it seems like they match up like an Australian with a Japanese guy or like a South Korean guy. Very rarely do I think they fight like Aussie versus Aussie. Either way, that's doesn't really have much to do with this. But Drilich just actually missed weight by 1 pound. I think he weighed it at 127. He's a guy that has fought at bantamweight, and I do think he's a little bit tubby at bantamweight. He's definitely more of a flyweight, and I was surprised to see him not be able to make 126. So maybe that'll factor into it here. So a weight miss on the Drilich side. But as far as his fight style, I love his fight style. I think Drilich is really, really solid. Really solid boxing. Trains out of Scrappy MMA, which if you don't know, that's where Jack Della Maddalena started his camps, and that's where he started out. I think he's still there. They're good. They're known for their boxing, and Drilich has some really solid boxing. The guy's really in and out, southpaw. He keeps his range, and then when he goes, he lunges in. Not really lunges, but he kind of leaps in, glides in. I would say he glides in because it looks smooth. Glides in, unleashes his combination, gets out. Takedown defense could use some improvement, but when he is on the mat, he's not terrible. Offensively, he's not really a guy that's going to be shooting a lot of takedowns, but he does have a couple submissions on his record. Sean Gauci, on the other hand, very good all-around fighter, very rock-solid takedown defense, another solid boxer, orthodox, really solid right hand. Both these guys like to counter with their rear hand. Drilich with his left hand and Gauci with his right hand. So we got a southpaw versus orthodox, probably a boxing match. If anybody shoots a takedown, I'd probably expect it to be Gauci because I think you probably have a little bit of a slight wrestling, grappling edge just because his takedown defense is solid and his takedowns offensively are pretty solid. He'll mix it in a little bit more than Drilich. Really, really tough fight to call because I think for the most part, considering this is on the Contender Series, I don't think either guy's really going to be shooting a takedown, and I don't think either guy has faced a caliber like this in their career. So it's going to be really evenly matched, in my opinion. And I think Drilich has a really solid chance to win this as the underdog. But I do think Gauci is probably the rightful favorite. I think he probably has the better all-around game at this point. The weight miss, it's always a toss-up with the weight miss. It could be an advantage going in there a little bit heavier. He's a guy that has fought up a weight class before. And I think he could come in here just hitting a little bit harder than Gauci. I think Gauci's counters are really sharp, But when Drilich throws, you feel the impact. You could see the impact a lot more than Gauci. Gauci has power. No, don't get me wrong, but his are more like timing. And Drilich is like boom, left hand right down the pipe, right hook, right uppercut. It's really nice. So I am gonna lean with Gauci for a straight up pick. I wouldn't be betting on Gauci at -195 just because I respect Drilich's game, and as the underdog, I actually might even get that way. But for right now, Gauci is the pick. Overall, really solid fight. Both guys are UFC caliber, and the flyweight division definitely needs both of these guys. Let's just be real. Moving on, we got Islem, Dulatov, and Vanito Antunes. If you don't know who Islem Dulatov is, go watch some of his fights. You'll want this guy in the UFC. Now, he's listed at 6'6". I don't believe that. I don't think he's 6'6". I'd probably say he's more like 6'4", maybe 6'4.5". But either way, he's a tall guy, very fast hands, very solid grappling. Most of his wins, I think 9 of his 10 wins come in the first round, and he's got pretty much half and half knockouts, half submissions. Early in his career, he was kind of fighting some bumps. Okay, you can watch a couple of his fights earlier in his career. He fought this Georgian dude who he's listed at like 35 years old, but he looked like he was 50. No reason to be in there with Dulatov. Lately, he's been fighting a little bit better of competition, and this guy just comes at you from the jump, trying to take your head off. Being 6'6", I'll call him 6'4" because he's not 6'6". Being 6'4", he doesn't really try to stay at range, dude. He tries to get in your face, unleash these combinations. Good sprawls on takedowns. Guys will try to take him down to slow him down. Pretty solid sprawls. And when he does get taken down, he gets back up right away. I mean, he'll throw you off of him, get back up to his feet, go to work, or he'll be looking for some type of submission. So Dulatov, I think, is the real deal. I think he wins this fight. Antunes, on the other hand, kind of all around, man. This guy's record is weird just because he's getting finished in the first round multiple times by KO or submission. And lately, he's picked up 3 wins. I don't really know, like, if he looked that great in them. Like, he's getting some finishes, don't get me wrong. And he's fought in the LFA. That's cool. But I think he's going to go in there against Dulatov. I think Dulatov's going to piece him up early. And considering this dude's been finished multiple times, I think he's probably going to crumble. And I think Dulatov gets probably a round 1 finish. And gets a contract, dude. Dulatov is the real deal. I think he's got a lot of good skills. There's no doubt in my mind the UFC wants to have him just because he's an exciting fight style. But, once he gets to the UFC, you can't just finish everybody in the first round. And I think eventually, we'll probably see a spot where he doesn't look to be this killer because the guy's going to be able to survive that first round and outlast him. His only loss is by decision. I think it was his first professional MMA fight. So 10-fight win streak. Ultimately, I think he gets another one here. Give me Dulatov. Moving on to some heavyweights. Mario Pinto and Lucas Camacho. It's a disgusting fight, boys. This tape study on these two fighters was like, in particularly Pinto. Tape study on Pinto was like watching paint dry. Okay, Pinto, you're going to watch his tape and you're not really going to be that impressed. But I do think he does a lot of good stuff well. Like, he's a heavyweight that doesn't go out there, take a lot of risks. Kind of just fights behind a jab, just kind of flicks it out there. He'll chop some low kicks. If you shoot a takedown on him, he'll stuff it. And then when he ends up on top, he's pretty heavy on top. So he's got a pretty solid all-around game. He's undefeated. He's a big favorite here, which when I look at their skill sets, I'd probably say that's somewhat warranted. It might be a little bit too high. But he's a guy that he doesn't take a lot of risks. I don't really see him getting knocked out here unless Camacho just catches him with something big. But I actually look at Camacho and I'm like, I don't know how this guy is winning fights. Like, it's so disgusting watching this guy strike. I forget which fight it was. It was one of his recent fights. He threw a punch like this. He threw a punch like this, like open-handed. And it grazed the guy in the eye. It was definitely like, it was basically like an eye poke. It grazed the guy in the eye, and the guy's like, what the fuck just hit me? I thought that was a punch. But its finger, like, scraped his eye. His eye gets all swollen, and then Camacho finishes him off. So, this guy Camacho, I mean, I like his forward pressure. he is a big dude. I just watched the face-offs, and he looks just the same size as Pinto pretty much. Pinto's a guy that actually fought at light heavyweight, but he's not like super jacked at heavyweight, but he's filled it out. So I like Camacho's pressure. I think if he pressures Pinto, he's going to have to make him fight, and I think that's probably his best path to victory is just keep the pressure on and try to drown him, because Pinto's not really going to be looking for those big exchanges. He's going to try to fight off the back foot, try to stay safe. And I think Camacho could maybe try to mix in just some cage control just to try to wear on him a little bit. Not that Camacho has like the best gas tank or anything, but he's just got to go for it. He's a big, excuse the burps. He's a big underdog here. And I wouldn't really say he should be this big of an underdog. I do think Pinto wins just because he's technically the better striker, solid takedown defense, solid top game when he ends up there. And I think just his fight style is not going to lead for a ton of volatility. And I don't really think Camacho has big one-shot knockout power. And we've seen Camacho hurt in a couple fights. Pinto's been hurt a little bit too, but he's been able to stay through it. Both is same as Camacho because they're both undefeated. But Pinto is the pick. It's a disgusting heavyweight fight. And I really am probably just looking for probably like some type of over or something in this fight because I was actually watching the weigh-ins, and these dudes faced off for a good like 5 to 10 minutes. They had to face off at the weigh-ins. They had to like forcefully bring them back so they could continue with the face-offs, and they were still doing the face-offs behind the camera for a good 5 to 10 minutes. That might be all just like all talk, or not really talk, but all just intimidation because neither guy really fights like I'm going to take your head off. But weird heavyweight fight, probably not one I'll be too invested in as far as a money line side. But Pinto is the pick. All right, let's take a look at the recap from last week. So it was our first losing week since week 3, I think it was. Week 3. So overall, we're profitable in 6 out of the 8 weeks. And just some very tough beats, man. Tough beats because this under 1.5, if we hit that, we're in the profit. And then I think it lost by 7 seconds. And it came down to Calderon defending 4 submission attempts before he got before Montez got the 5th. We had the Montez sub there. But, you know, you lose a unit based on a 7 seconds. It is what it is. We took a couple dog shots. The favorite swept. That'll happen. The DFS was a straight-up push, mainly because these fights were just didn't go our way. You know, it is what it is. But if you want to get all the bets for this week, there are some spots. I do have a play locked in right now, and I'll be sending that out to the members very shortly here. If you want all the bets, jump in the Home Fight Picks Premium membership on the Winnable. Use code Dana. You'll get a 5-day free trial. Year to date, we're positive 35.92 units. We picked up a very small profit at UFC 307, and the DFS were positive 42.52 units on the premium picks. So jump in there. There's a link down in the description to join. Use code Dana for a 5-day free trial. That'll get you Contender Series UFC this Saturday. And then we got PFL the following week. So a lot of MMA coming up, and we got Contender Series on Tuesday as well last week. So join up, use the code, and get that free 5-day free trial. Last 2 fights, starting off with Kody Steele and Chasen Blair. So Kody was supposed to fight Otani, and I liked Otani in that fight just because I thought his experience, his physicality could go in there, and I thought his striking was pretty solid, and I think Kody is a solid fighter, but I liked Otani at the odds. I think I got Otani at like plus 175, and I was willing to go in there and ride it out. And then Otani pulled out, and I'm kind of glad because if he's freaking out backstage to fight Kody Steele, not a good look. So glad to see Cody's back, though, because I do think Kody is a very good fighter. His base is in jiu-jitsu, been in a ton of grappling, I don't want to say tournaments, but grappling competitions. And since he went into MMA, he's 6-0, but he hasn't really been in MMA that long, since 2022. And overall, I think his game is coming along very well. He's a bigger name, I guess, just because he's been around the UFC Fight Pass, been on there a bunch with the grappling, and Dana definitely likes him. The way he was talking about Kody after Otani pulled out, Dana definitely likes the guy. When I first saw this matchup against Chasen Blair, I was like, I looked at that he's fighting in Cage Warriors, and if you know me, I'm a Cage Warriors fader for life. You fight in Cage Warriors, I'm gonna fade you eventually in your career, especially if you're fighting on the Contender Series or if you're making your UFC debut. And then I looked and saw his latest loss was against Ahmad Hassanzada. He got knee barred by Hassanzada. Not a good look, because I don't think Hassanzada is very good at all. And for you to get knee barred by Hassanzada, that's a bad look. And then I watched a couple of Chasen Blair's fights. And I'm like, okay, this guy goes for it. This guy goes for the finish. So to get caught up in a knee bar, it is what it is. But this guy, he throws hard. He throws with intent. He's got good grappling. He's got a good submission package. I think he's a dangerous dude. So I can't really overlook him here. But at the same time, the reason that I like to fade Cage Warriors guys is because a lot of these guys over there can't grapple. So if you can grapple and you're in Cage Warriors, you're probably going to do pretty well. Just because of the grappling over there in Europe just isn't really on the level of like the guys in Brazil or even on the U.S. regional scene here. So I think he's had some success with that. The only guy that he's knocked out on this 3-fight win streak, he's been knocked out a couple times. And the guys that he's been subbing has been subbed a couple times. So I do think Kody Steele is the rightful favorite. I don't think Cody's going to get subbed by this guy. I think he could possibly get chinned, but I don't really think Chasen Blair carries like a ton of knockout power. So I think Kody Steele's the rightful favorite. I'm going to take him for a pick. And I think Chasen Blair's got a lot of heart. I think you look at his IG, you can tell the guy works really hard. He's friends with Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett's always gassing him up for how hard he works. That's cool. But I think he's running into a very tough opponent here in Kody Steele, who's well-rounded and can weather any type of early storm from Chasen Blair and get his hand raised eventually. So give me Kody Steele for a pick. And lastly, probably the most anticipated fighter to step on this year's Contender Series, Artem Vahkitov. Now, if you don't know, you've probably been living under a rock, but Vahkitov is the latest man to beat Alex Pereira in a kickboxing match. If you go back and watch that fight, very solid fight. It's on YouTube, in Glory Kickboxing. He beat Pereira. Pereira was the champion. Pereira did beat him before, but latest one, he beat him. And it was a close fight. Pereira looked good early, and Vahkitov just kind of weathered it and took over as the fight went on. And I like that kind of style just because he's not really a guy that relies on a big knockout. He's actually winning most of his kickboxing matches by decision. And he's just a very technical dude. He's going to pick his spots when he throws. He's very accurate, chops the leg. But this isn't kickboxing. This is MMA. And this is where it gets tough because you have a guy who you know is an elite level striker. He's 2-1 in MMA. The only loss was an injury. He blew out his elbow when he was looking for ground and pound, and he just stopped. Since then, his MMA fights are just they're not even fights. Okay, his last fight, he landed 2 leg kicks. 2 leg kicks. And the guy didn't even, it's not like he got leg kicked and fell down. He just took 2 leg kicks. His opponent got kicked twice and was like, yeah, I'm out of here. Please stop the fight. I'm done. Come on. You know, you're going to take 2 leg kicks and then call it a day. That just seems fishy to me. But I guess he probably just knew he was never going to win against Vahkitov, especially after getting kicked once. He's like, all right, I don't want any of this. So, Vahkitov got those nasty leg kicks. But his MMA grappling really hasn't been tested. I don't know if it's going to be tested here against Islem Masraf because he's not a guy that has a ton of MMA experience either. He's only 3-0 in professional MMA. But he has shown a better, well-rounded game. I don't really think his kickboxing is going to be on the level of Vahkitov. But if he tries to wrestle, tries to grapple him up, we don't know. We don't really know if Vahkitov can fight it off. Now, I know he's a world-class athlete, so I got to assume he's working on his takedown defense. I got to assume those parts of his game are coming along, and they're probably going to be good enough against a light heavyweight type of wrestler, grappler. But Masraf does have a win by submission, a guillotine. That guy was trying to wrestle him, and he found the guillotine. Not really. He's looking for takedowns and that. He does have that viral knockout in the PFL Europe where the guy just walks out and Masraf just head kicks him. That was his last fight. So both of these guys' last fight, it's like you could just pretty much throw it out the window. So basically they have 2 fights. Masraf, big underdog here. He trains with Nasruddin Imavov, which is good to see. I don't think he's a bad fighter by any means, but I do think on the feet he's just going to be outmatched. I think Vahkitov is just too technical, and he's probably just going to work him a little bit on the feet. He's a massive favorite, though. Personally, not going to get involved there on the Vahkitov side at minus 620. That's disgusting. If he gets taken down in the first round, you don't know what the hell is going to happen after that. But in all reality, he probably does win here. And Masraf, I think he's going to have to grapple. But this is the Contender Series. You know, like, do you really want to go out there and just grapple to try to get a win? No, you probably want to get a knockout so that you can get a contract, because the end goal is to get a contract. But maybe he just goes in there wanting to win the fight. Maybe a win over Vahkitov is enough for him to get a contract. Vahkitov's my pick. Not one that I'll be super invested in. It's a very tough card to bet, honestly, just because there's big favorites, and you're probably going to have to play some type of props, like a 1-2 or something like that. And maybe there's not even enough value on that, because I think the under here is just super steamed. Who knows? But Vahkitov is the pick. That'll do it for the breakdown this week. We got 1 week left on the Contender Series after this one. Once again, if you want the bets, jump in the Home of Fight Picks Premium membership. Links down in the description. Use code Dana for a 5-day free trial. We got UFC this Saturday as well. I'll be looking forward to that. It's a good card, though. It's a good card, though, from a fan perspective. Appreciate you for watching. Like and subscribe. Till next time, AJ Picks. We out.